been in and out of my mind. Need to talk to somebody through all the things that I can't find. Everything in slow motion, maybe I'm wrong or maybe I'm right. Both share the same fight. Conversations in the dark, finding ways to find light.
What's going on, world? It's Aundrey here with Nia and Justin, and we're back with Conversations in the Dark. And this episode is one of our specific episodes where we just dive deep into one of the hosts' healing journeys. And I'm the lucky participant today to be sharing with y'all my healing journey, and then just, receiving questions and kind of connections, resonations with Nia and Justin. And so one of the things that I wanted to share, specifically about my healing journey, I really have like two specific areas that I was thinking about when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about as far as my healing journey. The first is, I think one of the things that doesn't get talked enough about a lot is going through your own healing journey as it relates to a father figure in your life, specifically with Black men. What is it, what does that entail? How do you go about having that conversation? One of the things for me that changed my life was a conversation I had with my dad about a year and a half ago at this point. That drastically changed our relationship. My dad, up to that point, had been like Denzel in Fences, been like that Black man who was letter of the law, my way or the highway type person, and what that was like living under his roof with that kind of mentality for the amount of years I did, and then how that shaped our relationship then, and then unpacking that, how that's shifted our relationship now, which has been great. And I think the second biggest place where I've undergone a healing transformation for myself has been in leadership. I spent the last 10 years in education. I went from being a college graduate, immediately jumping into the classroom at 21 years old, to being a principal before I was the age of 30. And while, everyone talks about the awesomeness that is success, the great admiration that comes with being able to achieve something like that, a goal that some people take their entire careers to achieve, which I didn't even think about when I was doing it, right? I never even thought about like this was something that people take a whole 30 years to do. There's a lot that comes with that in terms of the shadow side and the dark side of the healing that takes place within trying to achieve at a high level for so many years and then getting there. So those are really the two places that I thought about. Of course, I'm always open to where the conversation goes, but I'm excited to share a little bit more about my journey today.
No, yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about just a lot of that. I resonate with a lot of your story around success. I also resonate with your story around like having a parent with like expectations that supersede your emotional needs, and how that's the part I resonated with because that's what spoke to me. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about that, around like being a man and then being raised by a man, and then that being like the prominent caregiver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
My mom passed away when I was 7, and then I lived with my dad full time.
Yeah. And I just, in my healing process, I'm learning one thing about my role as a mother is to nurture my children in a way that is requiring me not to work so much. Mm-hmm. And I'm realizing just the health benefits of that.
Yeah. And I think as a kid, I didn't really process it. It kind of was like my everyday. Mm-hmm. So I knew if my dad was asking me questions and he was smiling, laughing, it was a good day. And that means I could engage more. And then I knew there was days where I wanted to engage more, and I could tell by his responses that wasn't where he was. And so those are the days where I often spent much time alone, either in my room. I was very big into like Legos and action figures, and y'all was laughing at me for playing Pokemon on my Switch. But like,
I feel it.
I tried to find other worlds that I could go into, play basketball, go with my friends. I would create these other places that felt like home, because sometimes home didn't feel like home.
Right.
So I needed to be able to find a space that made me comfortable like that. And I don't think at the time I was really processing that there was a friction between me and my dad's relationship by virtue of being his only child, and then being raised in a house that only had men, just two men, or a man and a boy. Yeah. At that time.
How would you equate that to like your experience with nurturing and affection? Like how to...
Well, one, I was fortunate enough, I think when my mom passed away, it was kind of a shock to everybody. I mean, she had a rare pregnancy disease. My baby sister also passed away. So it was like,
Oh, wow.
It was like, one day we were at Costco eating, having a good time. Her, me, and my older sister, who's 10 years older than me. And then that night, 2, 3 a.m., I get woken up. There's a bunch of sirens. There's ambulance. My sister grabs me. She pulls me out the house. She takes me to a neighbor's house. And then the next morning, that morning, 4 hours later, when my dad picks me up, he's like, hey, your mom is gone, and so is Kayla.
What?
Yeah. And I was fortunate at that time that my grandmother stepped in immediately because this is my dad's mom. Her father had passed away when she was 6. So she immediately knew, and she'll tell you this to this day. She's 90 years old, and she won't let nobody go out here and like, oh, I knew what it was like to be a child and to have her dad was the one that passed away. So again, opposite sex parent. She knew immediately he needs somebody. So she came and lived with us. And my grandmother she's very nurturing in a different way. Like she's an older black woman from the South.
Yeah.
And so there's certain things where, it's done a certain way, and that's how you do it. And that's how you got to do it because we black folks and we live in America. But she's also very nurturing in the fact that, she made sure that she came to all my sporting events. She made sure she told me she was proud of me. She made sure that I heard I love you. Again, because these were not necessarily conversations that me and my dad were having. Because also, and we and him never talked about this, but I can only imagine what it was like, despite the fact they weren't together. The mother of his only child that he's ever had, is now gone. And instead of having someone else to take care of me with, now he has to be the sole parent. So
As much as you want to share, are mom and dad together at this point?
no. So they split up when I was like 3, and then they were in like a little bit of a custody battle that got real tenuous, and there was lawyers involved, and so there was a little bit of a strain there, as far as I remember.
Right. At what age were you and grandma always like tight?
Yeah, we were like thick as thieves from like birth. I was her first grandchild, and my grandmother actually only has had men from her like lineage. Her and my grandfather had 2 kids, my uncle and my dad, and then each of them, my dad and my uncle, have had
sons.
boys. Gotcha. So it's like, she's grown up and she's raised like men, like her whole life. That's what she's done. So we've been really close. And I think like as she was raising me, there became points of friction because I felt a loss in my mom. Like I couldn't explain it to people, but I felt like someone was missing, and I didn't want anyone to replace that. I didn't want my dad's.
I don't think it's possible.
Had the same. I've had the same stepmom since I was 7. She's been around. My dad's partner. My grandmother's been around, but I didn't want anyone to fill that void, so I would push people away. So sometimes I pushed my grandmother away, but we've always been close. Like when I first became a principal, I went up and lived with her, take care of her 2 years ago because we're just always been close.
That's beautiful. I think that's a very beautiful like love story, and it also shows you like one thing like I also have been realizing is that because I lost a child and I held on to that
Really?
right before my
Hey, y'all fucking me up like this on camera. I got so many questions over here. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And so my daughter felt that resentment, like she felt that rejection because I felt really bad.
It was before Vonnie?
It was right before.
Okay.
Right before. I got actually, when I found out that she passed away, I was 6 months pregnant with her sister, with Vonnie. And so I was like, I buried one child and then just had another one.
Wait, the child was here?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I feel like, as a parent, we try to do our best within the confines of like what we can do it in. But when there's something missing, you can only do to the level of your understanding of that. And so I feel like I can just only imagine your father being a man and having to like deal with the fact that.
Yeah. Like, I mean, at the end of it, like, and that's something that I've learned over life. What has been to give a little bit more grace to my dad. I always was really, I think, hard on our relationship because in my mind, I'm like, you should have been more like supportive, more loving, more caring. Even though my dad never missed a sporting event in my entire life. I can't remember one game I didn't play and my dad wasn't in the crowd. And that is whether I played the whole game or I didn't get in at all.
That's dope.
And I never thought about that as support though, because the moment that the game was ending, right, there was always a conversation with feedback about what I did or didn't do. And to me, I let that be the narrative. And so as years have gone on, I've definitely been more gracious. I mean, my dad, just on the same topic, my dad, when he was in high school, one of his closest friends, a couple of closest friends actually, but one specific, I think he had some type of relationship, really best friends or relationship with a certain woman in high school he was with. A month before they graduated, she died in a car crash from a drunk driver while he was at his like championship track meet. And I can only imagine having been in a close scenario like that as a college age student when one of my friends passed away, what that's like to go through loss like that and not necessarily always have the ability to process, which again, I don't know if he has or has not, but those are the things that me and him haven't necessarily talked about, but I know about him now that I'm like, oh, I can understand how you have kind of become who you are. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have necessarily the same outlets that I'm even learning now as in my healing journey, I can understand why he raised me the way he did.
Yeah. It sounds like one of those generational narratives like I hear around like when men are really great men, mm-hmm. but they don't have the emotional capacity to process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely say like, if had it not been for the last like couple of years of my life, I probably, as much as I always would say, I'm not going to be my dad, right? I'm not going to be my parents. I'm not going to fulfill these generational things I see happen. I'm going to break off. And I didn't have the language of generational curses or, breaking generational trauma at that point. But I could see, now that I'm a little bit more conscious to my own self, my emotions, my feelings, my journey, that had I just continued around that path, I probably would have ended up in the same space where I was very devoid of understanding what was going on internally, even though I felt it. Like for a lot of my years, I felt a lot of emotions, but I didn't have the names of the emotions. And often my response was, hey man, just go sit over there. You know what I'm saying? Like I got stuff to do. I have a goal to achieve. And your frustration or the frustration, sadness, all y'all ain't helping me at all. So y'all need to go sit over there and I'm gonna focus on this. Or it's Friday, it's been a long week, it's been hard, but I'm just gonna go turn up. I'm just gonna get blacked out. I'm not going to remember none of this because I need to experience joy because I'm not experiencing that in other places in my life. But I didn't have the language of joy. It just knew something's off. Here's what I'm going to do to fix it. But it was unhealthy.
So moving forward, like with all of these, it seems like almost like rites of passage.
Yeah.
Into the next layers of your life. Talk to me about your leadership. Like, how did that affect your leadership? Yeah.
I think, and we've talked about this before, but I definitely think one of the things that this did in my leadership was I began to lean more into people pleasing than actually being the leader that people, expected me to be, hired me to be, or wanted me to be. Because in my mind, I think about this a lot. If black men, I was once told black men are the most hated people in society. And now I think of us as the most feared because I think hate is a symptom of fear. Mm-hmm. And so if we're the most feared, then how do we counteract that? Well, we have to be loved. Mm-hmm. Well, in my mind, to be loved by everyone meant to have a great relationship with everyone. No conflict. Void of conflict, void of any type of disagreement. Like, let's just make sure we're all in harmony. We're singing Kumbaya. And there was times, and that was different than what I was as a teacher. I was definitely laid down the law, but we had a lot of fun in class. And as assistant principal, I wasn't afraid too. But when I got into that principal role, I felt more of a weight of having more people under my charge and more people with opinions and thoughts and wants. And me being a very empathic person, wanting what they wanted for them, right? Because I always see, when I meet people, I see the highest version of that person's self based on what they tell me and based on what I pull from their characteristics. And in terms of leadership, that can be very hard because, one of the things I realized very early was like there's no blueprint to the leadership that I was trying to embark on because, one, I was the first black man to be in that role in my organization ever. So there was no one other person I could talk to. And then when I would talk to other people about what I was facing, it felt more patronizing, the stuff that they would tell me, like, oh, well, this is what I did when I went through it. And part of me would be like, okay, I'm trying to listen, I'm trying to gain from you, but your situation seems different. It just seems very different.
And times are
different.
I
can't get out of that. Yeah. And so, I think, over the course of the last couple of years, I learned that like there was several things that weren't working for me that I needed to change. And that was one of the reasons why I went back to therapy. And that has been a huge catalyst for the journey.
So talk to us about how like therapeutic intervention has like shifted the whole narrative for you?
Yeah. I mean, look, I believe that everybody should go to therapy at least some point in their life. I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that every therapist you meet will be for you, but I guarantee there's someone out there for you. And one of the things that helped me with was I found finally somebody that I could just share openly and honestly what I was thinking. And I even thought about a session we just had where I shared some, and she was like, oh, I didn't know that, but we talked about this last week, but you didn't share that. And I was like, you're right. I don't know why I was guarding this in front of you to that point of like therapy can sometimes be harmful if you're not being fully honest. Well, I know that therapy is a place where I can step in every day and I can just share what's on my mind unfiltered without feeling like someone's attached to the outcome of what comes out of my mouth. Because as a leader, often, I might be frustrated with you, but if I'm frustrated with you, Nia, and I'm your leader, you might internalize that as a deeper problem in our relationship versus me just being frustrated by this one thing. So I learned to hide the frustration I had with people because I felt like they were internalizing that and making it deeper about our relationship than really it was. You just didn't do this action I told you about, which naturally could be frustrating.
Yeah. And I feel like I can sense that in your leadership because we work together. And I appreciate that. I appreciate one of the things like I have noticed about your leadership style and skills is that you're very patient, but you're very stern at the same time when things need to get done. And I think that that's a really great balance of the two because, you've accomplished a lot of things in your life at a short amount of time. So I can just think of like the skill set and the level of like articulation you had to develop, and then to be so far ahead and then people be so far behind sometimes in their skill set. And this is how I feel about consciousness and being a therapist, because I'll just be sitting there like, does nobody see this with me? Like, there's so many signs here. And it's like, oh my God, this is too overwhelming. But my mentor told me that I have accumulated so much information, like just from being in that, like he said, get out my way, nothing matters, that like I could actually slow down.
Yeah. Yeah, I learned I had to learn how to be more patient because literally when I entered the classroom as a teacher, part of the catalyst was the death of one of my friends in college, the one I was talking about. And it became urgent for me. To me, it was like life or death. If I'm not serving kids powerfully in class, if this teacher across the hallway ain't holding kids accountable and serving them powerfully in class, we'll wake up tomorrow and one of our kids won't be here. And that's what happens sometimes. Some of the kids that I taught, some of my kids have been murdered. And that's what ultimately pushed me to be a principal. But I had to learn over time. And it was the hardest lesson to learn was like, one, not everybody sees the world the same, right? We all experience the world differently. So what Aundrey gets hyped about and what he has joy about and what he brings to the table ain't going to be what Nia brings or what Justin brings or how they see certain things. Right. And to what you're saying, it was frustrating a lot of times. Like it was super frustrating because I just thought that I was potentially working harder than other people, which could or could not have been the scenario. I think one of the things I've learned is that again, like I mentioned before, the work that we're doing is generational work. I might want black people to thrive today, and I do so bad. And there is literally nothing that I can do within my own power that can change the circumstances for all black people today. Right. Nor do I believe that there's any person on earth who could do that. Right. Nor do I believe that there's any system on earth right now that could do that. It's going to be generational work that we do that we all have to commit to. And that some of us have to do just a small action of moving the needle every day. And once I had that awakening, it released a little bit of the pressure I held on myself that then would get magnified when I stepped in front of other people, because I would create grandiose plans and visions and things for people of what I wanted to accomplish. But I would always struggle with those because it required collective action. And I felt like we weren't moving at the same pace. But what I realized, that was more about my own relationship with urgency and patience and grace and encouragement and gratitude versus what other people necessarily weren't bringing to the table.
So do you feel like that understanding was like something you can take away from your experience with your dad?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of a lot of what I've like, it's really interesting, right? Like in many ways, you know, looking back, if my dad wasn't the way he was, I wouldn't be who I am today.
Exactly.
Like I did a lot of things because my whole ultimate goal as a kid was like, how can I connect with my dad? How can I be the son that he loves? It's funny. We're talking about basketball in Justin's episode. Like Kobe Bryant, RIP, one of the greatest basketball players that ever lived. I didn't like Kobe when he played. And part of it was I realized once Kobe died, I was so emotional and I was like, dang, like I would have never guessed this, but I was so attached to him. Part of the reason why I didn't like him so much is because I felt like my dad loved him so much. I felt like he was the son that my dad always wanted playing basketball because of the way he would talk about Kobe. But I realized that, you know, I would try to do any one little thing that I could try to figure out to make my dad proud of me, to make my dad feel, to have me feel like my dad actually loved me, you know? And as I think about my own journey as a principal and some of the things I've learned throughout the way that I had to decondition myself was my level of urgency and the way that I attacked goals and attacked dreams was because I tried to get to certain places as quickly as possible so that I could be approved by people.
Right.
So that people could see me as worthy, so I could be acceptable.
Wow.
Versus the main problem was I wasn't even acceptable for myself. How can I accept myself?
That's dope.
How can other people accept me if I don't even accept who I am today?
Wow, that's deep.
And that's something that I still struggle with, right? Even now, like, you know, there's so many things that in my life that I still struggle with accepting about myself. And I know now, though, in order for me to be able to take that next level, I have to learn that deeper self-acceptance before anyone else.
First of all, we're going to have to like do so many more episodes about this because like I want to talk about like how does a black man get to a point where he can fully accept himself, especially in a capacity where he's never learned how to do that before. I think that
in a society that doesn't accept him, right?
Right, because I think that
And surrounded by people that can't teach him how to accept himself.
I think that's like extremely awesome. And these are the type of things in leadership we should be talking about because before we can be uber successful and raise our families in these amazing generational narratives, we have to learn to accept ourselves.
Yeah. And
Right.
and stop putting on a facade, right? Because for me it was easy. I could wake up any day and go teach y'all kids, and like I seemed like I had it all together, and internally I was distraught, you know.
I think for me it goes even the same with coaching, right? It's like when I'm as a basketball player, I saw the game at like a certain pace, right? Just like basketball always moves super slow for me, for some reason. It's a gift.
I wish I had that, bro.
Right?
It didn't come till later.
So then when I got into coaching, it was still slow, but at a different speed, right? So then it was like, okay, I'm watching the same game. You know, basketball hasn't changed. And then even as a head coach, I think that because that's why I kind of got quiet because I was listening to what you were saying as far as obviously we've all been students before. Then you were a teacher, but then when you became a principal, you're still dealing with the same 8-hour or 9-hour school day. You're still dealing with the same similar scenarios and everything. But the fact that now you're the principal, you're the head honcho, it's a different perspective. You know what I mean? And so I was thinking about that because my first year ever coaching, I had a kid get murdered like 2 months after season, right? The same thing, same kid where I've had to have my dad, who's a big name in the streets. I've had to had him squash some beef through this kid. This is a kid who I've only known for a few months, and literally 3 weeks, I want to say, after season that he got murdered. So for me, again, I remember I was saying I wanted to step away from basketball because it was just so triggering. It was so triggering for me just for whatever reason. So I got to the point where it was like, bro, I got to get back in somehow. I have to get back into coaching because that's my way of pretty much doing what you and because I'm learning myself in these kids because I went through the same temptations as you guys. You know what I mean? So when you're saying all of that shit, I'm really sitting over like, damn, that's deep, bro.
Yeah.
I really feel all of that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think that was the saving grace in all of what I've experienced. I don't think that I would. Again, I also think like if I would have made a different career choice, right? At one point, I wanted to be a lawyer, and that was like where I was going senior year until my friend had passed, and I got exposed to inequities that exist in education. And I don't I don't know that I would have the same realizations if I didn't have kids around me or other people who could mirror some things within me and help me grow, right? As many of my students that I probably, share with you that they life changed by being in Mr. Page's classroom, my life changed tenfold by even being able to meet that kid and experience that kid's version of life, seeing how that kid saw life. But yeah, it's one of those things that they always say heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? Anybody who's in a position of leadership, there's a lot of processes that go into that. And we don't always talk about some of the shadow sides of that. It looks good, right? But it's not always good in the way that we get there. It's not always good in being there. It's a lot of hard work that goes into it.
And commitment and dedication. So we are like 2 minutes away from this show ending. Can you just leave like a motivational quote from you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's gonna just kind of
like my own original quote or a quote that helps me.
I don't know yours, like, because you've had some quotables this whole
maybe
time.
Something you say to yourself, maybe a quote that you say to yourself that somebody could use.
You've had some quotables, or even something that you want to just like leave somebody with as far as like encouragement.
I'll share a quote and then I'll share my interpretation of that quote. A quote that I found recently in the last like 6 months that has helped me get through like this last 6 months has been a huge change in my life. I went from working at schools for 9 years. I've never lived a year. This is my first year in my life I've ever lived off of a school schedule, which is crazy, right? I'm 31 years old. I've always lived off of like August to June, right? Rather than January to December. But a quote that I've came across is a proverb from Haiti. And it's a Haitian proverb that says, beyond mountains are more mountains. Mm-hmm. And when I think about that, I think about two major ways in which you can view that quote. One is, damn, I climbed this mountain. I'm finna have to climb another one. Mm-hmm. But there's a beauty in that, right? Because what you know is that the journey is always continuous. Mm-hmm. That when you reach the pinnacle of another mountain, all the skills that you have with you now transcend that journey to the next mountain.
Yeah.
So that's what I'll leave everyone with. It's been great, and I'm excited to continue to jump in on more of these topics.
This is super blessed up. I feel like I'm blessed up. I feel like I got my life together. I have a dream. I'm connected to my self-mastery. Yeah. Okay. And nobody can pretty much tell me nothing. Okay, because I accept myself for being just a great person. So thank you for the energy.
Absolutely. Don't forget to subscribe, y'all. Conversations in the Dark.